My mother was a traditional mom. She made sure we were clean. She made sure we were well dressed. She made sure the meals were on the table. She took care of my dad. My dad came home, whatever time, she'd put something out for him to eat. That was her life. But I'm sure she had a deep emotional life. I didn't know about it. She basically was a mother. You know, she just did the things you're supposed to do.
Took care of everybody else.
She took care and nourished us. She was a nourishing mom. My dad, much harder to read. Not that simple. Hard worker, did what he had to do, took care of business. I don't think I ever saw my father, when it came to business, not show up and do what he had to do. They called him at 2 o'clock in the morning with a problem. He was there. And I admire that. And I admired what he did for a living. And when I was in school, I became editor of the newspaper, like my dad, your dad's son, you know. And I'm thinking this is a point to connect, because we didn't have a great connection. I hardly knew the guy. So I'm the editor of the paper, he's the publisher of the paper. Common ground to communicate. We can talk about the press and the duties and the rights of the press, but we don't do that because he's too busy. He's not there. And I even tried to set it up. I tried to set my schedule and be in the right place when he came home so we could talk. And that wasn't my job as a kid. That was his job. It was the father's job once in a while to be there for the kid and not for the kid to set it up to get the father. Isn't that right?
My hypothesis that Raymond's issues about becoming a father have a lot to do with unresolved feelings about his own father is now coming into play. Raymond previously spoke about his father in a very detached way. Now, some quite powerful emotions are surfacing.
He must have known. How could he not know, this smart man, that his son wanted to at least talk to him once in a while about what was going on in my life?
It's a puzzle that he wouldn't have picked up, that you were, you know, just in following in his footsteps in this way, bidding for his attention.
That's a good word, bidding for his attention. Trying to play it just right to get something out of this man.
And as you reflect on this, you seem to be in touch with some anger.
Yeah.
Is that the emotion?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, as we talked about last time, sometimes anger is sort of a cover for other emotions. And I'm wondering, as you think about this event that happened so many, many years ago, if you're aware of any other more vulnerable emotions that might be underneath that anger.
Maybe, you know, I have this sense that I'm mad at him, but there's also that sense of, well, maybe if I had been a little smarter and worked it a little better, I could have got something going with my dad. And even a little guilt. Well, he was busy. And if he wasn't working, then how could he support the family? So am I wrong to have wanted him to stop what he was doing to be with me?
Yeah, so the emotions that occur to you now is that you're starting to think that maybe your demands were excessive, maybe you weren't taking enough into account about his schedule, you know, and these kinds of things.
Oh, yeah, and then I think, well, then I would get resentful of him for not being there, and maybe if I wasn't, but I still think he was the father. Didn't he have isn't being a father more than just paying the bills? That I shouldn't take the full blame for this.
You really, it sounds like you were yearning for and expecting so much more for him.
Yeah. And
perhaps disappointed?
Maybe he didn't know how, but damn it, he should have tried. He really should have tried.
So you're in touch with some sadness about that?
Yeah.
I've never seen you express sadness about your father.
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Can you say what it is that you're feeling?
Sadness that I missed. You know, I missed I missed it.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I missed something that right now seems very important to me.
Yeah, yeah. Touch with a lot of emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Sounds like there's really a lot there, you know. When we first talked about your father a few sessions back, it was kind of sort of a little bit pat, you know, and he was this and he was that and so forth. But as we talk today, I get the sense of a wealth of emotions that might be there. And I'd like to suggest a way that we could proceed in this regard to try to get some clarity about what's going on and resolve some of these feelings. It's an exercise that I've used with men whose fathers are no longer alive and who are, you know, wanting to come to terms with their relationships with them. And it involves, first of all, trying to identify the questions that you have. You've described your father as a man. You didn't know what made him tick. So I'd like you to spend a little time trying to formulate the questions you would ask him if he were alive today. And maybe spend a couple of evenings, a half hour each time, and write these questions down on those 3x5 cards you've been using for your emotional response log.
Questions I would ask my dad.
If he were alive today.
If he were alive.
In the service of trying to figure out what makes the guy tick.
I can do that.
All right. Then I'd also like you to sort of bring your emotional response log into this. And when you write down a question, think about what emotion you have about that question and write it down.
I can do that too.
There's another little piece I'd like you to try here. You know, it works for some people, it may or may not work for you. But in addition to writing down the emotion, sometimes it's helpful to express the emotion in color rather than in words. So using some colored felt tip pens, choosing, you know, a different color for each emotion, sort of make a swatch of color on the card that expresses the emotion that you feel.
Let me ask you this. I'm going to ask questions that I never asked, most of them, but I would like to ask if he were here.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm not exactly clear on is that it would be frustrating to write down questions that I would like to ask, knowing I can't ask them.
Mm-hmm. I think what you're expressing is that, you know, obviously there's something in this exercise that you know, feels difficult, and I have no doubt that it will be difficult. But you've shown yourself capable of taking on things that are difficult in the past in the course of our work together. Of course, he's not alive. Of course, he can't answer the questions. And maybe when he was alive, he couldn't have answered the questions either. The point of this exercise is really not so much to get specific answers to the questions, but to use that as a way to come to terms with the feelings that you have about your father.
Which, so every time I write in the question, it just seems like I'm going to do the exercise. It just seems like asking those questions is not something I want to sit down and do in an evening.
In an evening,
because
it's painful.
It's painful.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. It's not an inviting task. I understand that. But as we've seen today, and as you're starting to discover, there's a lot of pain in your relationship with your father, and you know, getting to that pain and starting to see what's there and putting it into words will give you a better handle and a better way to deal with it.
Worth a shot.
Okay. Good. One other thing, if you have any photos of your family when you were growing up, why don't you bring those in too?
Like, did he feel anything towards me? Did he have affection? Did he ever screw up